So in the state of Pennsylvania, we have the largest population of juvenile lifers in the country, 512, and they are going to have a chance to be resentenced and returned home. Philadelphia County holds less than 1% of the nation's population, but if counted to close to 15%, 300 of all juvenile lifers without parole sentences nationwide. And 90 persons are going to be coming back to this area. So we have a unique opportunity in this state to facilitate the release and the transition of juvenile life. So really the eyes of the country is going to be on Pennsylvania, because many people believe that life sentences or death by incarceration sentences should be declared unconstitutional. But the argument has always been, if you do that, how will you facilitate the release of these people? Well, in Pennsylvania, we have the opportunity to do that. TCRC is working with Juvenile Lifers Project, the Public Defender's Office, and the Federal Defender's Office, and many lawyers who are working on the project. And it is a wonderful opportunity to bring to reality what we had discussed in abstract. And to really make this work, we're going to need the support of the public. We're going to need the resources of churches, organizations, dedicated people, because the oldest of these lifers, Julian, was, all these guys were incarcerated between the ages of 14 and 17. Joe was incarcerated at the age of 15 in 1953 when Eisenhower was president. He's 78 years old and he served 63 years in prison. So his reentry is going to be something very, very special. But over 30% of these men have served over 30 years and they're going to be released. Now, this is not the first time this has happened. Yes.
Can you please include the women
Yes.
in your statistics, because there's a lot of women like this who have served 30 plus years as well.
Yes, and they're going to be released also. And there aren't as many women who are going to be released, but the women are definitely there. And sometimes we have the tendency, because there are so many male prisoners, to overlook women, but women have a distinctly different path through prison and through reentry that must be acknowledged and must be given honor to. Now, as I was saying, other states that honored the original sentence, Miller versus Alabama, have begun the process of bringing the juvenile lifers back into court and resentencing. And it has not always gone well. If you look at California, there have been cases where people have gone back into court and received that life sentence because they have not used all of the factors, all of the rehabilitative factors that people have done, and many times the courts have said, listen, you didn't do it properly, you have to go back and do it again. But we hope that Pennsylvania can do a little better. One of our concerns is that some prosecutors are advancing the proposition that if you serve X amount of time, you can be released immediately, but you have to be on parole for life. That's like a carrot, because if you tell somebody who's been incarcerated 30 plus years, they can be released, I mean, they want to go home. But the reality is, you can't take that deal. You can't agree to lifetime parole. Because the Supreme Court has said that a juvenile life sentence is unconstitutional. So these district attorneys are trying to substitute one illegal sentence for another. So it's up to lawyers and advocates to convince these men that, yes, I know you want to come home, but don't take a deal that the reality is 3 or 4 years down the road, if you violate your parole, you're going back to jail for life. So you have to have long-range vision. You can't just look at what is happening right then. Could I open up for some questions? Yes.
Okay, I just wondered, a lot of the people that you've mentioned now, are 65 plus. When they get out, they're not going to have Social Security because they didn't hold a job where they got it.
Yes.
So what safety net are they gonna have to even provide for themselves?
That's something we're discussing. You know, we're having ongoing meetings with lawyers, with service organizations. Some of these men have not only, well, none of them have paid into the system, you know, and many of them don't even have social security numbers because they were juveniles and they never worked. So that's something that has to be worked out, you know, how people who do not qualify for social security or disability are going to be taken care of once they are released. And that's a major concern. We're trying to work and see what can be done. We don't have an answer yet because this is a totally new proposition. Understand that history is being made. This is something brand new. And in terms of trying to find employment for people who are murderers, you know, males and females, having folks reintegrate into their family after 30 or 40 years of being incarcerated. It was a difficult transition for me reintegrating after 18 years. You know, imagine what it is after 30 or 40 or 50 years. You know, when most likely, you know, your parents are gone. You know, most of the elders in your family who really love you are gone. You know, so you're really dealing with a new generation who's probably only known you from prison visits, letters, or photos. They weren't actually a part of your life when they were growing up because you went to jail so long ago. And that makes for different family dynamics. You know, so many folks come home and the mother and father are gone, and their sisters or brothers are older, you know, and they have grandkids, and those kids don't really know them, and it's a much more difficult transition than it would be if all those who you love and you spend time with in the world were still alive.
If I could interrupt real quick. If people are interested in thinking in this space that you guys are talking about right now, please, my name's Jeff Shook from the School of Social Work. Please talk to me after this or get in touch. I can give you my contact info because we really want to get together to think about this here.
And on that same note, I'm working on this white paper for Rikers Island, and part of the paper is envisioning certain structures for holistic prisons. So if I have social work students or, you know, practitioners who would like to be involved with this, please take my card and get involved. And, you know, in 2 weeks I have to put together a preliminary idea, and then those ideas are going to move forward. But this is a wonderful way for you to be involved in a project that's also going to be revolutionary. Understand that in the world of mass incarceration, so many things are happening that are groundbreaking. You know, we are in a time period where I say that the struggle for social justice and mass incarceration is a new civil rights movement. And I firmly believe that if Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, yes, if they were alive, they would be fighting against mass incarceration. They would be fighting for social justice. So we have a unique opportunity to be involved in some groundbreaking work.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you, along with what you were saying about individuals that have been incarcerated for 30, 40 years and coming back in the mainstream, what are you gonna have in place to help them to adjust and to adapt? I mean, look at technology's changed everything. How are you gonna help these individuals so that they don't fail and that they do have some level of successes to be able to connect?
We are going to create family systems that help them move forward. You know, we view TCRC as a family. And the beauty of what we're doing is we came through these same things. You know, I came home in 2009. I got my first cell phone in 2009. You know, and my grandkids helped me, and you know, my kids, and you know, we went through that whole. One of the first things I did when I came home is I took a computer class. Because even though in the prison I had used a word processor, you know, I was computer illiterate. I didn't know anything about the tech. had to learn. You know, so we are going to put into place peer support networks, mentors, and programs that will help them to adjust. And we're going to, you know, talk with their families, and we're going to try to create cohesive arrangements so that they can transition. And it has to be holistic, it has to be healing, and it has to be personal. We have to create a life plan for each one of these men and women who come out. And work very hard to make sure that that life plan is tailored for them, they're comfortable with it, and they can move forward. Yes, brother.
I work in the prison system and actually do some work in the juvenile system too, as a chaplain. Something that's real important to me is, and I love what you're doing. I love what your group is doing because it's phenomenal, because they need the support, they need the help. What I see when the guys are coming out of the prison and the women are coming out of the prison, when they're getting that support at that time, they're so overwhelmed at that time, they get frustrated. Is there a way that, and I love the support, and I think it's important to have that support so they can go forth. Is there a way to start the process even before they come out of the wall?
Yes.
So that the relationship building could happen, even the family reintegration could start even happening, so that they could start the process, so they could be able to go forth and have a support system to be able to walk as a village.
That's extremely important, and that's why we're working with the stakeholder organizations to try to put some of these things in place. Understand that this is not going to be immediate release. You know, each one of these cases is going to be individual, and they have to go to court, and they have to, you know, be resentenced, and then they'll be released. You know, so we have time to begin to work on this level. But the reality is, many of these men, some of them were already in contact with him due to our contacts. We have a wonderful director of prison outreach, Anthony Dickerson, and he did 10 years in Greaterford. And over the last 3 years he's been home, he's built a serious internal network. And we have over 450 TCRC members actually in state prison. You know, so we're already disseminating information and, you know, writing and talking. We're going into Smithfield April 25th. We're in Greaterford about a month ago. You know, we're already working toward that end. You know, but what you're saying is extremely important, and we acknowledge that. Yes.
On that question, as far as things that the state actually has to do, like, which is getting Social Security numbers, state IDs, all of that, where if you don't have that, you can't move forward on so many things. Can that process actually be done before someone's released?
Yes. We had a great meeting with the Philadelphia Ranger Coalition, which has been extremely proactive. You know, I cannot commend enough the stakeholder organizations who are involved in this effort, who are very proactive, who are ahead of the curve. And we had a meeting with the Department of Correction. We were in Philadelphia in a conference room, and they were Skyped in, just we could talk back and forth. And they are trying to put things in place that are going to move this forward. You know, but once the Department of Correction is thinking a little bit, you know, because traditionally, the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections are not noted for being forward thinkers. You know, but this is such an amazing occurrence that they're forced to really put in some serious work just to facilitate the basic things. And yes, they're moving forward with that. Yes, here and here and here.
When you mentioned, you know, having ex-offenders or returning citizens being classified, you know, have their own classification as like a disability or whatnot, something that gives them, you know, special consideration, where would that advocacy start? Like, would it be on a federal level or a state level, or where would you start to try to you know, to initiate that?
We're starting on all three levels. In the city of Philadelphia, about maybe 2 years ago, Mayor Nutter designated returning citizens for all formerly incarcerated. And that in itself was the beginning of the process. But once you start to change the language, you know, once you say returning citizen instead of ex-con or ex-felon or ex-offender, you know, you begin to change the perception of the person. You know, so you start on a local level. You know, on a state level, we're We're doing some work with the Pennsylvania Council of Churches on mass incarceration and on the issues of trying to create programs and to create a mindset that will support an eventual change. That's it. You can never accomplish change without laying a framework or foundation for change. So you do that on a local and on a state level. On a national level, you work with the Friends Committee on National Legislation, which is a Quaker lobbying organization. I'm a Rastafarian Quaker, which maybe you've never heard of before. That's another story for another. But they are extremely proactive and interested in mass incarceration. And we want to create legislation on a national level that will support that. But before that can pass, you need to create momentum on a local and a state level.
I wonder if you could tell us something about your situation, how you were able to move through the system the way that you did. Well, I mean, what you were doing before you went in, and what you went for, and how you were able to move yourself up while you were in, and what was your relationship with your prisoners during that process?
You must have some time on your hands. Let me give you a brief version. Before I was incarcerated, I was a businessman. I was an artist. I ran Creative Signs and Graphics, which was the largest black-owned graphics company in the city of Philadelphia. But I was also a part-time bank robber and a full-time gangster. And that's what I did. I was definitely involved in countercultural activities. I grew up in the civil rights, Black Power era, and our real philosophy was, you could do the government no harm. Anything you did was against the government was justified by the treatment of our people, and that was my basic mindset. As I said, when I was incarcerated, I was blessed to run into Dr. Shakur and come under his mentorship, and in that circle of consciousness, I found my true place in the world. And I was able to transform myself and move forward and help other people. And I like to say that I'm a social worker now by virtue of the fact that I've gone to school and I'm becoming, a social worker in that sense. But I was a social worker for 16 years inside. And we did that same work. I think that we were respected because we were real. In prison, you don't have the facades that you have on the street. If you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're a business person, you got a beautiful wife, you got a nice home. You don't have any of that. On the inside, all you have is the strength of your personality. So I like to say that prison is like a furnace, and it burns away all the superfluous things. If you're a weak person, if you have no character, if you're not to be trusted, if you're slimy, that's going to become apparent because day to day, that's going to become apparent. If you're strong, you have good character, and you're able to rise above adversity, and you don't let anything move you from your path, then you become a beacon that others are drawn to because they need that foundation and that stability and a model of how to live. And often, young guys are looking for a father figure. They're looking for an example of how to be a black man in America, which is a daunting proposition in any circumstance, but all the more so in incarcerated circumstance. And so I kind of rose, to where I should have been all along had I not gone through that period where I was doing, ridiculously stupid things. Well, I was a pretty good bank robber too.
Too bad you got caught.
Yeah, that's true. Yes.
How do you navigate advocating for a rehabilitative system alongside with the retribution that's sought after by people who are affected by the criminal activity? I would imagine that they would want the magnitude of suffering to be matched by stricter and longer sentences.
Yes.
And what you're advocating for wouldn't match with what they're expecting.
It's true. I had a very volatile argument on the corner of Broad and Walnut with the district attorney who's in charge of all capital crimes in Philadelphia. I I have a very good friend who's a lawyer, Deborah Rainey, who does fantastic work for us pro bono. She's one of the best lawyers in the city. She's a bulldog, you know, and she just does crazy, crazy work. In fact, we had a spectacular disaster. Because of my work, we have many, many successes, you know, and we, you know, parade those successes because it helps people to recognize the value of our programs. But we also have failures. And I never hesitate to, you know, say our failures because that's what happened. And we had a guy who's in a homeless shelter who's a really good guy, and he's one of our stars. We had just given him 3 or 4 suits of clothes. He had interviews lined up for several weeks. He was doing very well. We thought he had some extremely good job prospects and some home life situations. And that Friday, well, Sunday morning, I was watching the news and I saw there was a shooting on a homeless shelter at Broad Lehigh, which is not far from where I live. And my first thought was, we had 5 clients there. I mean, I was going to meeting. I was going to a quick meeting that morning. I said, I can't go to the meeting. I got to go down there and see about our clients. I went down there. 3 of the clients were there to find. The other client was off somewhere, and the 5th client, he wasn't there, but he's a good guy, so I didn't really think too much about it. I'm like, I'm glad he's not here. He's not involved. But the next day, the police came to our office, and he was a person of interest in the shooting, and it turns out he did the shooting. And what happened is he got drunk on a Friday night and came in, drunk disorderly, and put him out. He came back the next night to get his clothes. It was like 10 degrees outside, and through no fault of the staff there, the clothes were in an area they had no access to, they had the keys to. And they tried to explain this to him, but he wasn't trying to hear it, and it got volatile. He went home, he went somewhere, got a gun, came back, murdered one guy, and shot the other. And Deborah Rainey, our lawyer, took that case pro bono. Hopefully we can stop him from getting a life sentence. You know, so she's a wonderful lawyer. But after that story, what was the original question?
Like from the people who are affected by the criminal behavior, like in that case would say, I want everything.
Yes. All right, so yeah, get back to the story, I got a little sidetracked. So I had this argument, I saw Deborah Rainey on the corner, and she was with a bunch of beautiful sisters. And so of course I stopped and said hello to her. And when she introduced me around, one of the ladies said, oh, I heard about you, and she kind of attacked me. And it turns out she was the head prosecutor for capital crimes in the city of Philadelphia. And her position is, if you take a life, you got to give it. So she prosecutes every murder case in the city of Philadelphia with the intention of giving somebody a life sentence. So I stood on the corner for about 10 minutes, and I presented my point of view to her, and I talked about restorative justice, and I talked about balancing the scales, and I talked about the families, the victims, because we have 2 very special organizations in our city of Philadelphia. One is called EMIR, Every Murder is Real, Every Murder is Real, and it's named after a young man, Emir, who was killed, who was murdered, and his mother started the organization. And she does restorative justice. She mediates, anytime there's a shooting, she mediates between the family of the shooter and the family of the victim, so there's no further violence. And that's restorative justice at its best. And she's a person who lost a son, so she knows that pain. And then there's another organization called Mothers in Charge, and Ms. Dorothy Spink runs that. And about 10 years ago, her son was murdered, and she took his insurance money, and she started an organization, and she does the same thing. So we have 2 very powerful organizations in our city of black mothers who are in the fight for restorative justice. You know, so we have help. We aren't by ourselves. But your question is a good question because it's very difficult to tell the family of someone who was murdered about restorative justice. They're not trying to hear it. Because their loss is so immediate and it's so great. But you must realize that in that scenario, you have 2 tragedies. You have the tragedy of a son or a daughter who will never be a part of that family again, and their loss of that family, they can't make memories with them, the children they would have had, all that is lost. But you also have the tragedy of the person who did the shooting, who is now going to get life in prison, they're gonna be the living dead to their family. They can never be a part of that family circle. So yes, it's very difficult, but just because things are difficult, do not mean that you do not continue that fight. And, you know, that lady, you know, she spurred flames on me on that corner, you know, because that's her belief system. And, you know, what really hurt me is that she's the person who's in charge of capital cases in the city. Which means that young boy on the corner who's getting ready to shoot somebody has no understanding of what he's getting ready to face. He's getting ready to face her. But she's justified interactions because that's her belief system. You gotta deal with that. Yes.
Yeah, I'm a documentary photographer. I think pictures of poverty in the region, economic injustice.
Well, where's your camera? You should have filmed this.
Right.
I'm not wrong. Where I go, you can't carry around a big camera. Anyway, the point is that what I'm trying to say is that in my experience taking pictures, you often see a lot of elderly homeless people wandering around with baskets. I don't think people realize the reason this is because one of the problems, not only can ex-cons not get jobs, they can't get apartments because nobody will rent to them because they're living in prison. So what happens is often these ex-cons end up going into homeless shelters, and in the process, because of all the damage, emotional damage that's been caused by prison, they're often difficult to have emotional problems and quite literally scare the elderly homeless out of the shelters. This is why you see, this isn't, I'm not blaming, I'm just saying, this is a byproduct of the whole prison system, how, in fact, it displaces people that are older homeless from these shelters because they're afraid because they're going to get beat up or something. So I don't think people realize that, people that are ex-cons, I know somebody, in fact, he lives in a mental hospital because he can't find an apartment. He's mentally ill. He's not a predator or anything. He's fine to live, but he can't find any place to rent because nobody will rent him because he's been in prison. So I don't think people realize that, the fact of the matter is one of the reasons you see all these elderly homeless people wandering around, and people wonder, well, why aren't they in shelters? Well, if you actually talk to them, because I have, I've taken their pictures and talked to them and I've been honest about it. And I won't go to a shelter. I'm just afraid to go.
They're not safe.
They're not safe.
Shelters are not safe places.
No, but,
Shelters and halfway houses and prisons are allowed.
yeah, this is very sad because, the whole system is just, is such that there's so many other victims, not just prisoners, but other people end up being victims of the prison system as well.
If you weren't the head of TCRC, am I saying that correct?
Yeah.
And you met a returning offender, a returning citizen, excuse me, and you just had limited time to talk to them or give them a little piece of advice or direct them in this, what would you say to that person?
I would say that it's very important to stay focused on your freedom. So many times we don't stay focused on freedom, we don't value our freedom, or we have short-term memory. And by short-term memory, I mean that it seems as the more time you're out of prison, the less time you remember the trauma that you went through in prison. I have a pair of shoes that I bought in the commissary in 2006. And in my apartment, I have a 2-bedroom apartment, and one apartment I use for my grandkids, coming over because they're always crashing over my house. But along one wall is an open closet. And on the corner of that closet, on the shelf, so every time I go by there and I look in, I see those shoes sitting on that shelf. And those shoes remind me of all the miles that I walked in those shoes, and all the years that I did, and all the people that I left behind who are still walking in those shoes. And sometimes unless you have a tangible reminder, or you keep in your mind the trauma that you went through, you begin to forget. Or time, how folks say time heals all wounds? Well, time also lessens the impact of some things you went through. And you cannot let go of those memories. I'm not saying I replay every day, the things I went through, but imagine 25 years of incarceration, 2 sentences. I've gone through some serious situations in my incarceration. And unless I hold on to that and use that as a foundation to move forward, I might slip. Because there are always things that happen. But you have to be focused. And you have to truly want to never return to prison again. I'm never eating commissary food again. I'm never working out in a weight pile. You know, I'm never running around the backyard. I'm never going back to prison again. And that's the kind of mentality that we try to foster among our population. And for guys who can't feel that, I tell them, listen, you know, and some females too. Because, you know, sometimes, you know, we get females who come in and they spin us a good story, but underneath that story is the same bullshit that they've been doing all along. And males too. You know, I hear so much bullshit about my line of work, I mean, it's incredible. You know, but the fact is that prison is a place where, say for example, you're in a place where there's 1,000 men, and everybody has game, everybody has an agenda, and you're always having to like look behind what's said, you know, and determine, you know, real intentions and who's dangerous, you know. So you get a really good sense of people, you know, and it's like, you know, you can really tell when somebody's not being real, you know. So sometimes people come in, they're not being real, and they're not really interested in what we have to offer. They're there because the parole officer sent them, or halfway house sent them, and they're just in and out. But they're really focused on being free and getting back to their life. You know? So we help those who we can, and some people we can't help. When I see folks I can't help, seriously, you know, it may sound hard or cold, but I don't waste time on people I can't help because I have so many people who really need help. And that's the reality. You know, so I help those who I can. And I would encourage that person to hold on to his vision of freedom and stay true to it.
So it's my job to say we have come to the end of our time. I'm the bad guy in the room. Let's thank. Thank you. Days, and I continue to be amazed at what he has to say and what he's doing. So I'm sure you're willing to talk to people if they want to talk to you and engage.
Cards, you know, I'd like for you folks to go on our website. I have a great TEDx talk on the website. You're not tired of hearing me talk. More importantly, our website shows what we're doing. It keeps you up to date. You can even sign up for a newsletter. You know, so on a bi-monthly basis, you know, there's indications of what we're doing. I'd also like to ask, you know, those who can afford it to donate, you know, and support us. You know, we are an organization that exists upon the kindness and the support of those who guide our work. You know, we're not heavily funded by the government. We haven't got any major grants, although we're applying.